Welcome everyone, and we'll go ahead and get started. I'm Tim Maloney from the Hoosier Environmental Council, and I'm joined tonight by Mark Nowotarski with the Coalition to Stop the Mid-States Corridor. He's from Jasper, Indiana. Jeff Stant, Executive Director of the Indiana Forest Alliance, and my colleague Emily Plunkett, who is our Outreach Director, and Emily's also helping with some of the logistical matters with the presentation. So welcome everyone. We expect some other folks to be joining us over the next hour. Emily, you want to go ahead and put the slides up? And we'll start that off. And again, here's the folks on who are part of our panel. And then next slide is our brief agenda, what we're going to talk about, which is an overview of the public participation process during the preparation of the environmental impact statement, key concerns and issues with the project, advice for submitting effective comments, which includes what we recommend you include in your comments, and then how to submit them, which is where to send them via email, in written form or online, and then time for questions and answers. So we'll go ahead and get started with the review of the process and what's happened to this point. And I see a question from Lisa Harris. We've scheduled an hour for the workshop, and sure we could go a little longer with questions if need be. Variations on a new highway in this part of Indiana have been studied for close to 20 years, and but even though there were various studies, there was never a decision made to proceed with the project, and a lot of the interest centered on bypass proposals around Jasper and Huntingburg in Du Bois County. And with the state not showing a lot of interest there, there was a state law passed in 2017 to create a mid-states regional development authority that would allow local interest to fund an environmental study for a broader project in this area. And that has led us to where we are today, with this regional development authority raising over $7 million to pay for an environmental impact statement through an agreement with the Indiana Department of Transportation. That EIS process has been underway, and the standard, these environmental impact studies are governed by federal law, the National Environmental Policy Act, and they provide that the process starts with a scoping period where preliminary project ideas are put out and reviewed. There are public meetings, solicitation of public comments, interviews with various interests, and a preliminary screening of project alternatives. And that work has all took place from 2018 through basically through last year. And in April of this year, INDOT released the draft environmental impact statement. They have evaluated in this impact statement 5 alternative routes, and have identified one of those routes as their preferred alternative, which is Route P, that generally follows the existing US 231 corridor, but it's all new. It's 54 miles of new terrain highway with a bypass around Jasper and Huntingburg and a bypass around Lagodi. The release of that draft environmental impact statement triggers a public comment period, which we are in the midst of now, and that comment period ends next week, next Tuesday, the 14th. Once the comment period concludes, NDOT will do additional analysis, review comments, and select a final alternative at some point, either later this year or next year. And that selection of the final alternate, or the chosen route for the highway, if they choose to build a highway, would be announced in a final environmental impact statement and a record of decision. And that is the formal decision that says whether or not the highway will be built and where it will be built. That's the process in a nutshell. We have been working with our partners for many months to generate more input into the project and raise a variety of concerns about the impacts of the project on the natural environment, on farmland and human communities and endangered species, and the whole range of social, economic, environmental impacts that result from a major infrastructure project like this. So with that, I'll turn it over to my colleagues, Mark and Jeff, to talk about some of the key concerns with the Mid-States Corridor, and in particular with Route P, which is the preliminarily identified preferred alternative.
Jeff,
Mark, you want to start off, Mark?
Sure, I'll start off. So again, the DEIS, which is the draft environmental impact study, is, in case you were not aware, if it is available to review online on the Mid-States Corridor website. You would have to, once you're on the Mid-States Corridor website, you'd have to go to the tab that says DEIS and click on that, and you could scroll down and you could open up and look at the DEIS. It's a massive document. It's 484 pages long, along with appendixes that total over 2,000 pages, with a lot of detailed information. But even if you look at the first section, which is the summary of the DEIS, you would get some flavor of what content is in there and how they came about creating the decision of selecting a recommended Route P. But the problem with it is, as you go through all of the data within the draft environmental statement, is there's a lot of contradictory data. There's a lot of very obvious skewing of data so that they could provide what they wanted to recommend. And when I say what they wanted to recommend, they're really following the lead of the business, the handful of business advocates that have been pushing for this, for some kind of highway to be built for quite a long time. It's very difficult to go into all of the detail and the conflicting things. What I can share and what I'd like to share is that we've put, the Coalition Against the Mid-States Corridor put a document together, and it's titled Topic Suggestions for Written Comments. And that entire document, each of the pieces of it are shown on our Facebook page. Under the Facebook page is Stop the Mid-States Corridor. So wait a minute, Stop the Mid-States Corridor Project. So if you're on Facebook, you type that in, you would get to our page. And what we did was we identified 10 categories within the DEIS where there is information in there that's just not adding up. And what I wanted to do very quickly is kind of give you what those 10 categories are, so that if you're looking for a particular subject to write about for your written comments, you could zero in on that. And I'm just going to give a couple examples from each of them. So I'll give a topic suggestion, and then I'll just usually there's about 5 or 6 bullet points listed after that. I'll just point out one just to give examples. So the first one is farmland and agriculture business. And in there, you'll see it says the number of acres of farmland that will be destroyed is between 1,354 and 1,832 acres of general farmland and 520 to 733 acres of prime farmland as defined by the study. And that is strictly for the Route P recommended, that they've recommended. The next one as an example is under the category of environment and climate. A couple bullet points there. The proposed route will rip through 629 to 923 acres of forest land, and that doesn't include other trees that will need to be removed in the path of Route P, and also the greenhouse gases that will actually increase, that they actually identified that in their study. The third category is cost. And under cost, the proposed route will cost between 780 million and 1.052 billion. And that's at today's dollars. And that doesn't include all the land acquisition and other extraneous expenses that will be required. And that's just for 54 miles of this new terrain road. So the fourth category is travel time saved. And, bullet point, instead of what we have is instead of fixing the data to show total time travel saved by adding, what they did was they added up several destinations and tried to point out that you're going to save several minutes of time, travel time. But in actuality, when you get into the data chart, the study it clearly shows that, and I'll give you an example, the travel time saved between Jasper and Indianapolis is between 2 and 5 minutes. So, which is obviously a minimal amount of time for, for all that expenditure and all that destruction that'll do. The fifth category is economic development. And it says the economic development opportunities stated within the study, they're all projections. None of them are based on any kind of factual data to support it. And also to contradict that, research shows that when highways bypass small and mid-sized communities, those places see a negative impact, especially for the local small businesses. So again, those are just a couple of the bullet points. Sixth category is displacement. The study indicates between 100 and 149 homes, businesses, institutions, and farms will need to be displaced for recommended proposed Route P. So that's just one of the facts. Sad, a little bit of a side story before I go on to the next category. I spent this past weekend, Saturday and Sunday, visiting a number of homes along the path that will be taken. And it's just to listen to those families' stories and what they've done over the years to build up their, with their land. And several of them are multi-generational. They've had land that they've then given to their siblings to build their homes, and then others that have given land to their children to build their homes, to start their families and stuff. And it's just really disastrous to hear those all those stories and stuff. So every single one of them that I talked to is definitely have been writing their comments in to several people, in fact. So the seventh item I have on there is traffic congestion, or really lack of. And what's interesting there, and someone could help me out probably when I'm almost through here, but when they first started promoting this idea of the Mid-States corridor, they talked about the need to, the reason for it was to improve safety along the existing US 231 highway and congestion. And during the process of this DEIS, those goals got shifted down to where they're no longer primary goals anymore. And they shifted the study to identify primary goal as being travel time saved, which unfortunately, or fortunately for us, when you look at the study, there's as I mentioned before, there's very, very minimal time that you save. So under traffic congestion, just one of the bullet points, a new terrain highway will not reduce the perceived traffic congestion. Semi-traffic will still be required to deliver the goods and ship goods from local factories, distribution centers, for retailers like Home Depot, Walmart here, grocery stores, furniture stores, and others. And I've tried to ask INDOT, I've tried to ask Lockmuller, who's doing the study, if they have any kind of traffic count or projections of what percentage of that traffic would not be using the routes that go through the towns of Jasper and Huntingburg. And they don't have that data at all. They don't even have a projection of what that is. So pretty poor planning on their part. The eighth category I had is bad investment. This 54-mile route will cost, again, between 780 million and over $1 billion at today's dollars, with very little traffic time or travel time saved and very little return. The ninth point is divided community. And this is something that kind of was expected. So when you look at the 5 routes that they had put on their maps, 2 of them going to the east that would go through Orange County and destroy a lot of the karst region and other forests and a lot of endangered species. Then they had 2 that went to the west that would connect up with I-69 near either Washington or Petersburg, I think it is. But those weren't going to save any time. So they knew that once they pick a recommended route, that they would get a percentage of people, I'll give you an example from, let's say, Orange County, that they're going to sit there and say, okay, now it's not coming, it's not going to affect us. So we don't have to worry about it anymore. And some of that has happened, but fortunately, with all the efforts that we've been working on for the last 2 years, there have been quite a few that understand that this may not stop here. This could just open up a Pandora's box for anything to happen in the future. So they are totally against, these people are totally against any type of new terrain highway in southern Indiana here. The other one that I always point out, because I've talked to a lot of the Amish community, and I look at it as kind of a modern day version of redlining. If you know what redlining is, it's a lot of times in major cities years and years ago when they put interstate highways in that kind of separated the poorer communities from the middle-class communities. Well, this highway is going to cut through and cut off access to that the Amish community uses for their everyday travels for what they need to do. And then the final one, and I'll turn it over to Jeff after this, is just the whole area around the study process and how the issues. So when Tim talked about how the Senate bill was developed so that they could start, they could form a regional development authority that then could raise funds for this study. There was absolutely no public input opportunity that was provided before any kind of determination of to move forward with a study. They purposely, when they were going through the language of the bill before it got passed, there was language in there about a public referendum. Once that got removed, which meant, okay, no public input then for the start. Once that got removed is when that Senate bill was passed. So pretty tough things to take. But if you go to our Facebook page, Stop the Mid-States Corridor Project, you will see all the documents on there and all the bullet points that would hopefully help you in any areas. And we've been encouraging everyone, you don't just have to write one written comment. You could write multiple written comments of the different subject matters that you're interested in. I know personally, I'm already on my written comment number 11, and I have another one that I'm going to be starting this weekend and finishing up. So, Jeff, turn it over to you.
Okay, well, you've covered a lot of ground there, Mark, and some points I was going to hit on, but I can make some points that kind of relate to them. Can we go back to the map, Tim, that you had posted on the screen? Is there a way to go back to Route P?
Yeah, Emily will pull that up.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, well, one of the things that I want to hit on, Mark touched on it, was that, they had these other routes, and we were particularly concerned about routes O and M because they go through predominantly forested areas and large parts of public forests, whether you're talking about where they got O there and it's pointing to the Route O route there, that's right in the Shirley Creek area, the Hoosier National Forest, or where M is pointing, that's pointing right at Tincher Hollow in the Hoosier National Forest. Beautiful, large roadless and expanses with hiking and horseback riding trails that were going to be really destroyed by this. But so they switched it over to P, and a lot of folks breathed a sigh of relief. But that, the problem is that if you look really closely at the impacts of any of these highway routes, they're devastating, no matter which route you choose. And P, in a lot of respects, is one of the worst ones. If you just look at where the Naval Support Activity Center is there at Crane, there's a lot of beautiful rolling and flatter forested ground there that this road is going to go through. And when it goes further south and it's crossing the floodplains of the East Fork of the White River, it's disrupting a lot of river floodplain land, and that's some of the most important wildlife moving habitat in the state. Migration and wildlife travel corridors are predominantly on the floodplains. And so it's actually, I think, disrupting about the second highest amount of floodplains of any of the alternatives. Only O, or I think M, is going to disrupt more floodplain acres. And when you look at the total acres, or excuse me, the total, well, Mark was commenting on the farm acres that are going to be taken, and it's the second highest amount of farm acres of any of the alternatives. But but if you look at the prime farmland category, the maximum range of prime farmland taken is actually the highest with this alternative. It's 733 acres is more than any acres of prime farmland destroyed by any of the alternatives. So it's taking out a level of forest that's in the mid-range level of the alternatives and hitting potentially the most prime farmland of any of the alternatives. It's disrupting a lot of river bottom land, and it's important to recognize that this is all happening as the road is paralleling a US 231, and you see all those black dots on that map that the government's already committed to putting $75 million into right now to upgrade so that it can accommodate traffic and deal with congestion and problem points of the highway. So there's absolutely no justification for this. Some more detailed impacts of Route P. It actually is the route that is in close proximity to more federally listed and endangered species than any of the routes. I think 5 bats, 4 of the mussels that are in the White River that are listed as federal endangered, the lake sturgeon fish, and the monarch butterfly. I think it's 11 species in all. I don't know how much I trust those figures because the inventories of natural data in the state, it's all based on the Indiana Natural Heritage Database, and that's just based on spot reports. It's not based on any systematic attempt to inventory the heritage of the state, but it still speaks loudly that Route P, they're acknowledging, is closer to the habitat of more endangered, federally endangered, nationally endangered animals than any of the other routes because of its crossing of the rivers corridors and the fairly high amount of forest it's still wiping out. And Mark mentioned that the 623 to 923 acres of forest. Now, keep in mind, that's just the direct destruction of forest by the highway. And one of the complaints I've always had with these projects and the documentation for them, I think I-69 was bad this way, is that they don't take into account accurately the total acres of natural habitat that are going to be wiped out. Because it isn't just what's destroyed immediately. The whole purpose of this project is to bring more traffic to this part of the state. And why? Well, because they want more development. And so the idea is to develop thousands of additional acres in addition to these that they're going to destroy with the actual highway alignment. And anyone to see what I'm talking about, just drive down I-65 today, either north or south of Indianapolis. It took about 70 years for the development after they put that road in to reach this crescendo that is happening now. 60 years, I guess. It's how old is 65? I'm trying to think. It's somewhere in that range. But now you cannot go down I-65 from Indianapolis to Louisville and be 3 minutes away from some kind of sprawl, big box store, big warehouse, trucking center that's torn down woods, clear cut it, and farm ground, permanently liquidated it into being concrete parking lots, and remember all the housing and other logistics that have to accommodate that growth. So the indirect impacts of these highway projects are far greater, and that's what this project is about. It's about destroying rural Indiana and the rural economy that sustains those open spaces and keeps the forests and farms because people work them and make an honest living about it. This is really an attack on rural Indiana. The promoters of this want to tear down the forests and farms that people have successfully worked for generations and replace them with concrete, asphalt, trucking, and all the sprawl and real estate that comes with it. So it's a we need to recognize this project for what it is. It's special interest motivated pork barrel. The people who passed Senate Bill 128 that set up this very undemocratic process for coming up with this highway and foisting it on people with nobody else's input. They are all connected to this trucking industry or transportation and shipment. And they've come up with a project. They say the 3 core goals are to, 1, increase accessibility to major business markets, 2, provide for more efficient truck and freight travel in southern Indiana, and 3, increase access to major intermodal centers from southern Indiana. And I think that, we need to, our comments need to assault that as a valid purpose and need for throwing people off their land and their homes and carving up the limited open space and forests left in the state. And because I just don't think if we're going to spend 35 million, you mentioned 780 million. I thought the lower level was 735 million, but whatever. If we're going to spend somewhere from 700 million to $1 billion to build a highway like this, that the project documents say that's about making it easier for truckers to get around that area faster. When the project documents say that by 2045, the total truck hours that will be saved if you build this highway versus if you didn't build it at all will be reduced by 1% in the 12 counties that the project area serves. 1%. Then there's no area of the state that we shouldn't pave over in order to increase access to it. There's no valid justification for this. And Governor Holcomb, and you need to say that in your comments, and Governor Holcomb and Senator Braun and State Senator Mesmer, who I think are the 3 principal people behind this, they need to hear from you that that's not an acceptable use of eminent domain on people. That's not in the public interest. You reject this highway categorically, and you want, you're willing to go along with the 75 million they're spending to upgrade 231. That's fine. If they have a problem where they've got congestion in Jasper and Huntingburg, those communities need to deal with that. But to build this super highway from Crane down to I-64 at Dale and cause all these impacts is just not justified in any shape or form or for any reason. And so it's an assault on democracy. It's an assault on fiscal responsibility. And those are some things I would point out. I've mentioned the higher number of federal species that Route P, they say, is going to impact than any other of the routes. Among them, the 5 bats, they mentioned that they do acknowledge that it's not the cave so much because there's very little karst or caves along Route P, but there's summer roosting habitat for the Indiana bat and the northern long-eared that they acknowledge it'll wipe out 228 to 282 acres of the maternity roosting habitat for Indiana bats and 161 to 188 acres of that habitat, maternity roosting habitat for the northern long-eared bat. Now those animals are on the verge of going extinct. The most important habitat component they need is maternity roosting habitat, deep forests where the females roost and raise their young. Wiping out that habitat for this totally unjustified highway is just unconscionable. That'd be another point you could make. And keep in mind that there are 2 other bats that they're about to be listed that the project doesn't acknowledge. The little brown bat and the tricolored are both under species status assessments, and the data is overwhelming that they should be listed as endangered. And every fish and wildlife service biologist you talk to on the inside will tell you if they're going to follow the data, they have to list them as endangered. They are in the project area in the deep forests. And last thing I'll say is that it's going to wipe out the western half of the Gants Woods Nature Preserve that's just been established in Davis County. And that is habitat for bobcat and a whole host of neotropical migrant birds. Beautiful sandstone cliffs and forests in it. Excuse me for my coughing.
Oh, yeah, COVID.
I have COVID, and I'm trying to not just show it that much.
Hey, Tim, before we get it back to you, I thought of a couple other very quick things that I did want to mention. You know, we talked a lot about farmland and the effects, but what I wanted to talk a couple things that the DEIS does not address or does not recognize. And one of those key things is the value of the agribusiness down here. They do not put a economic value of the amount of agribusiness that takes place. So they talk about economic development and give projections on, oh, what this could bring to the area, but they're totally wiping out a large chunk of the economic impact from agribusiness. That's one of the things. The other thing that they don't even cover, and what I find interesting, I've had the opportunity to talk to a few law enforcement officers about this, and they have real concerns about this highway going in from the standpoint of increased drug trafficking, increased human trafficking, and the fact that Jasper would be, you know, a convenient hub for things to take place there, you know, with if they're, you know, easy access to get on and off and that is, you know, those are the type of things that aren't even addressed in the DEIS. So those are my last comments.
Well, thanks, Mark. And you'll have time maybe for some more comments too. Well, one thing I wanted before we go into the process for submitting your comments, now that we've talked about the kind of things you can and should talk about, is the reason for the range of impacts is that the final design of the highway won't be decided until the second phase of the project study, which we didn't mention at the beginning. This highway project studied in two phases. They're called tiers. We're in tier 1 with the principal environmental impact statement that's under review right now. If NDOT chooses a build alternative to build a highway somewhere, then they will have to do a second phase of environmental studies called tier 2, and that's done in sections. The project will be divided into sections, and each of those sections will be separately analyzed. But what's curious about this project is that the decision whether to make it a 2-lane highway or a 4-lane highway will not happen until tier 2. So the analysis at this point is just looking at the range of impacts. These are the impacts if it's only 2 lanes. Those are the lower numbers in the range. If it's 4 lanes, the impacts in terms of acreage or sites affected are the higher numbers. And also to keep in mind that to the extent this project would provide any economic benefits, those all largely would only come if it's a 4-lane highway in terms of travel time savings, things like that. So just wanted to clarify that the exact nature of the roadway is not known at this time, which is why we talk about the range of impacts. So we'll go through the process for commenting, and so to send the formal comments on the project to NDOT, you can do that 3 ways. You can send them in writing to this address in Jasper at the Mid-States Corridor Project Office. You can email your comments to this address, info@midstatescorridor.com, or you can go to the website for the project, midstatescorridor.com/DEIS, and there is a comment form online. So you can type in your comments in that online form, press submit, and they'll be submitted immediately. So you can choose one of those three ways to comment. And again, the deadline is next Tuesday, June 14th. And as Mark and Jeff have mentioned, if we could go to the next slide, it's also important to share your comments with our elected officials. And so we've listed some of those key officials, as well as the NDOT commissioner, but also Governor Holcomb, Senator Braun, who has been mentioned, was involved in the passage of that state law creating the Regional Development Authority for the Mid-States. Jermaine Hannon, the administrator of the Federal Highway Administration. The Federal Highway Administration has oversight of this project because federal highway dollars will be used on it. And then two of the key state legislators from that are in the region of the highway, and principally in the Jasper area, that's Shane Lindauer in the Indiana House and Senator Messmer in the state Senate. There's also Senator Todd Young, the other U.S. Senator. And if your own state legislator is not one of these folks, you should copy them as well. But of all those people, Governor Holcomb is the most important because he will be the decision maker on this, whether to build it and where to build it. And so it's absolutely key that he receive a copy of your comments, and we'd certainly encourage you to, since it can be done electronically, to go ahead and copy all these folks as well. And we will, after this workshop's over, we'll send around a fact sheet to everybody with these email addresses and contact information, and as well as the comment talking points that Mark mentioned earlier. We'll get that around to everybody. Emily, could you go to the next slide?
If I could interject real quick, Tim, again, if you go to the Facebook page for Stop the Mid-States Corridor Project, you'll also, if you scroll down through the comments, we've listed and expanded, besides the names and contact information for the ones that Tim just gave, we've actually have an expanded list there that might help you in identifying. And we've been encouraging people to write their letters specifically to Jason DuPont at the Mid-States Corridor office, but then send duplicate copies to all the others.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize that I think the thing to make sure you get done is your comment into NDOT, and get your friends and networks to get their comments in, but urge them to, if they're pressed for time and they don't want to spend time copying or figuring out all the other addresses to copy them to, then just save their comment and send it. You can send it later to the politicians, but they need to hear from you. And so I definitely, you want to do that step, but the most important step now is make sure you get your comments in by next Tuesday.
That's correct.
Evening.
Yes.
Into the NDOT person.
Yeah.
Is that Jason DuPont?
Yes.
That's if you had to
He's
hit
the project
one person,
manager.
yeah,
Yeah.
he would be the person to hit, right? I mean,
Yes.
yeah, if you had, and then you take that copy that, send it to these others, and ask each one of them just at the top, please do what you can or please stop this project. Just emphasize that at the top, and here's my comments on it. It's a pretty simple step, but
yeah,
they need to hear it.
Yeah, we did want to acknowledge the the various partners who have been involved in this work over the last months and years, who we worked with, Forest Alliance and the coalition folks are on the call with us tonight. Sierra Club has been a key partner, the Environmental Law and Policy Center, the Karst Conservancy, Orangeville Rise, which is a citizens group. Again, just to emphasize that even though the preliminary selection of Mid-State's route was not Route O or Route M, which impacts very important forest and karst areas, those routes are not off the table. And so we can't assume that effort to stop those routes is final yet. We have to continue to be concerned about that, and if that's one of your concerns about impacts to karst and the Hoosier National Forest, and the other resources along routes O and M, you should include that in your comments to reinforce that those routes should not be chosen.
Yeah, can I add, Tim, that the reason that it's so important to comment against Route P is that there's no justification for it. So yeah, let's say they end up building Route P, we essentially don't defeat this highway, and it's considered to be, the state decides it's justified, we're going to do it. I think it's a reasonable fear to have that it's only a matter of time before a Route M or a Route O or some other route that is awful and terribly unjustified is proposed. We have to defeat the basic premise that's on the table here in order to safeguard forests and farms everywhere. Because what they're saying is those have no value. Increased truck speeds and truck traffic everywhere trumps that, no matter what the costs are of those values, and no matter how expensive it is for us to provide it. We have to defeat that premise. It's critically important that we defeat Route P in order to protect the Hoosier National Forest in the future, and forests and wetlands everywhere. So that would be my reason for saying, don't let your guard down. Please comment against this egregious, atrocious, proposed highway, Route P. And also recognize that this whole tier 1, tier 2 thing is a scam. It's been used to make it so that it's impossible to really look at the relative impacts of alternatives in an effective way. If you can't even comment on, that you can't, all these decisions about whether it's going to be 4-lane or 2-lane, how many historical archaeological areas it's going to wipe out, how many bat roosts, that doesn't even happen until tier 2. At that point in the process, it's impossible to stop the highway. The decision has been made to build the route in that corridor no matter what, and you can't get it stopped. So, we have to comment now. We have to defeat this thing now with comments now. And the politicians have to feel the heat so that they stop this now, because it's going to be too late at tier 2 to do that.
Yeah. Well, we're getting about 10 till 8. Want to get to some of the questions and comments. Emily, if you could go to that last slide with the web links there for more information. But let's look at some of the comments and questions here. I know Lisa Harris had asked about not understanding the various routes going in different directions. Well, that route map is the 5 different alternatives that were considered. Only one has been preliminarily chosen, and that's Route P. So that would, if the project goes forward, that would be the only route that's built, not the other routes such as O and M and B and C are the 4 other ones. Lisa also mentioned about karst regions being flagged in NEPA projects. Does the data address that? Yes, the draft environmental impact statement has a review of impacts to karst, which are basically along routes O and M. Now, whether that data is complete and accurate is in question, and there's certainly indications that NDOT and its consultant did not have full karst data. Keith Dunlap on the call may want to comment on that. Also, Lisa's got a lot of good questions. Who's driving this and will make the most money? We touched on that, but Mark may want to say a little bit more about that in terms of the Jasper area interests.
I would love to, and I would love to name names. So this project has gone on, like Tim said, for quite some time, and there was a group headed up by a business executive, Hank Mankey, who owns Office Furniture, OFS, and he had put together a coalition to put a study, because he wanted an interstate to go by Huntingburg and Jasper, and he wanted it because when I-69 was decided to go on the route that it did, it bypassed DuBois County. So he started a coalition for I-67, which would have been an interstate. Well, NDOT ended up shutting that down. And that's when they folded it into, this group got together to fold it into what's called the Mid-States Corridor. So very much led by Hank Mankey, but also Mike Braun, who is now a US Senator, but at the time was an Indiana representative, also owner of Meyer Distributing in Jasper. He was instrumental behind this, pushing this, and he, along with Indiana Senator Mesmer, were the ones that authored the Senate Bill 128 to be able to form this RDA. There are a few other businesses that support this, Jasper Engines being one of them. And the idea there is they want easier access for their trucks. They believe that they'll save time, and again, they'll save them money. And they really don't, it's been obvious through this process that they don't care about anyone else besides improving their business routes to make it easier for them. So hope that answers the question.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Let's see what else we got here. I know Keith Dunlap has provided a couple of information points on more information about bats using sandstone cliffs, not just caves, and also that mud puppy salamanders are in First Creek along the corridor. Lisa expanded on her question about the map and what looked like random routes. The alternatives were different ways to connect Rockport, Indiana on the Ohio River to I-69 at different termini. So routes B and C connect to I-69 at Washington. Route P connects there at Crane, where existing 231 meets I-69. And routes M and O connect to State Road 37 at Bedford or Mitchell, and then via 37 to 69. So that's the connection that is proposed to be made by this project, and that's why you see the different routes that the highway could take to make those connections. Jeff mentions the concerns about the new Sentinel landscape project, which is a project of the U.S. Department of Defense and some state agencies and nonprofit groups. You want to say something about that, Jeff?
Jeff's on mute.
You're on mute, Jeff.
Am I on mute now? I
No,
don't think, yeah. Well, it was actually Mary's question. I just typed it in here for her, but yeah, I could comment on it. That there's a tremendous contradiction going on, because the state of Indiana and the U.S. Department of Defense and the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the U.S. Department of Interior have all come together to designate more than 3.5 million acres in southern Indiana that really Crane Naval Weapon Ammunition Depot is at the center of, as a Sentinel project area, where they are providing a whole agenda, a broad spectrum of programs to assist private farmers and woodland owners to practice sustainable farming and forestry, and as economic incentives not to develop their land and to bring in more housing developments and create industrial parks in the flyways of the Indiana Air National Guard between Crane, Camp Atterbury, a spot over in western Indiana, south of Terre Haute and Air Force area, and then Big Oaks. And the idea is they don't want private development to encroach upon these military bases. So they're going to put a lot of federal assistance into helping woodland owners and farmers in these areas maintain their rural land. And yet here we have a highway being proposed whose primary mission is to bring more traffic to Crane and by Crane to Indianapolis. It's doing the precise opposite. And so I think it just, that would be a good thing to comment on. And you can look up the Southern Indiana Sentinel Project on the website, just Google it and you'll see what I'm talking about. But you couldn't, as a state government, do anything more opposite than what the Mid-States Highway Route P is proposing to do. It's actually proposing that there be more encroachment on Crane. When these agencies and the governor have all come together to say we need to have a strategy that minimizes encroachments on Crane, to maintain our military readiness and the nation's defense, and so it's quite a contradiction, and I would urge you to look at commenting on that.
Okay. Let's see what else.
It's hypocrisy, Mary says.
Yep. Jessica asks again about the official stated purpose of the project. Jeff or Mark, you want to review what that stated purpose is?
Let's see, she's asking exactly what does the leadership officially or publicly state as the purpose of the project. And you say simply saving truck traffic time money is the primary reasons. If you get a chance, you can go on to the DEIS and I think Carl gave a link to the chapter 1 where they show the purpose and need. They had originally identified or they put together 7 core goals, of which, again, I mentioned this earlier when they were promoting the need for this early on. It was all about safety and easing congestion, and those got taken off as far as priority core goals. Those are just nice to have core goals. The 3 that have been identified as primary core goals all are around truck traffic time saved, travel time saved.
Yeah, at the end of that purpose and need section, they identify them, the three core goals they are the reasons that the fundamental reasons for building this proposed highway are: number one, to increase accessibility to major business markets for everyone, but laborers, truck drivers, salespersons, to increase accessibility to major business markets. The second goal is to provide more efficient truck and freight traffic in southern Indiana. And then the third goal is to increase access to major intermodal centers from southern Indiana. Things like the Indianapolis International Airport, the Louisville Airport, the train stations up in and around Indianapolis, the river ports on the Ohio River. These are the three fundamental reasons why they say this highway must be built. Now, I mean, look at a map of southern Indiana. There's so darn many highways going in so many directions. That idea is just absurd, if not obscene. It's just it's something that they should be really, roundly criticized for even proposing a highway to do something like this when we have so much more serious needs to address. But those are the three purposes, core goals, as Mark says, for building the highway. I want to point out also that there were there's like 7 total, I think, and the others are considered secondary, and some of them deal with safety and congestion. And there was a Federal Register notice that was put out, I believe, in 2014 that the purpose and need chapter even acknowledges. And that's why I think we got the Mid-States Highway thrown at us now, because they were trying to build bypasses earlier around Huntingburg and Jasper. And the Federal Highway Administration, and I guess, and Tim or Mark, correct me on this, I'm not sure who was the author of the Federal Register notice in 2014, but they put out a statement. It might have been the state saying it, as well as the Federal Transportation Authority. But they acknowledged at that point, after having gone through several rounds of whether to build those bypasses in a project, that the purpose and need for those projects to decrease congestion in Jasper and Huntingburg and improve safety was not justified. That there was not a justification for spending the money to do that. The problems weren't serious enough. So what they did was they realized they couldn't use that purpose and need to build those bypasses. So they just expanded the size of the whole project to make it some big thing about, interstate traffic that's needed in Indiana, 20 miles east of I-69, that isn't even finished being built. It became it morphed into this ridiculous boondoggle that now they're trying to get the public and the political officials to buy off on this idea that, well, we should just be able to build it just because we just want to provide concrete. We want to provide an exit ramp to every place. And it's an assault on common sense. And we urge you to write about those things if they come to your mind. I think it's important to write from your personal, just what you believe. It's important to get what your own beliefs and your own experiences are and your own philosophy is across in your comments.
And just to add to that, the irony of this project is that even if the purposes were considered legitimate, the project does not do well in meeting those purposes. It doesn't really demonstrate that it meets the purposes in any effective manner. So it doesn't even, the highway won't even do a good job at what the promoters say it's all about. So that's the irony here. And the DEIS basically demonstrates that. So Let's see what else. Let's go a couple more minutes here. We're about 8 after 8. If people want to hang on. And Keith asks about the 75 million in improvements on 231, says he doesn't think the local improvements shown in the DEIS are those improvements. That was my understanding that they were, but Keith,
That's my understanding also.
Yeah,
The
if you
little
want to,
black dot, they've identified, if you look at the black dots, and what they've said is that there are sections that they will be adding passing lanes. They give examples. I think there's one that is a passing lane that ends up being 3 miles, another one that's 2 miles, another one that's a mile long. And then they're also want to make improvements at some of the intersections along 231 through Du Bois County.
okay, but Keith, if you have more info that causes you to question that, let us know.
Well, I don't. I just thought it was interesting that there is local improvements shown on all the other routes also. So I guess I was thinking that these were local improvements due to the highway impacting sections of, say, US 231 where it crosses, or other things, or the other routes, where you're crossing existing roads that you had to make improvements in there. So I don't know that the 75 million is not what's shown there. It just didn't seem like, because I'm sure they were thinking of these improvements long before the 75 million was announced last year. So I just question the timing and whether those are the improvements, or whether, that's where that 75 million was planned for some other thing, or maybe there is overlap of what they are.
Keith, my understanding on those other areas that you see along or near the other routes that had the black dots, those are already NDOT projects that were on the books to improve, whether there's going to be a corridor going through there or not. That's the way it was told to me.
Okay, that very well may be true. I didn't see. All right, I just wasn't putting the two together. That
right.
Okay, Keith, you also asked about the length of current 231 versus the new length. The new length's 54 miles. From what I can tell of the current length along that same stretch is 50 miles, but Mark may know better about that. There was a Route R that was discarded earlier, which was simply upgrading 231. And I think it had that length at 50 miles. But
yeah, I can't remember the exact, whether it was 50 or whatever, but they're similar in length.
Yeah. But if you're trying to improve the situation, why are you building a longer road that meanders a lot further? And if it's going to be a cleaner road, then it's higher speeds, so that's lower fuel economy. So now you've just built a road that is less environmentally sound than the existing road. Now there's some trade-off, because as you go through towns and there's traffic lights, that kind of kills your fuel economy too. But it's just like I-69 section 4 was a lot longer than it needed to be. And if you compared running on I-69 versus State Road 45, you were like 5 miles longer and a lot worse fuel economy. But when you calculate the CO2 levels, you just created a huge environmental impact for the next 100 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are good points.
Yep.
We haven't mentioned the requirement, I thought, in the new federal transportation funding bill that was passed last year, and the guidance that was put out that prioritizes new, all improvements on existing terrain over any new terrain roads. Does that bear mentioning here? Somebody who's more knowledgeable about that might want to comment on that.
Well, there are new requirements for evaluating transportation projects with respect to climate impacts. And so I don't know that we know exactly yet what that means from a kind of the application of that policy to projects and evaluation, but that's definitely something that we need to be looking at as we go forward on this, and make sure that NDOT is taking that into consideration and complying with any of the new guidance.
You don't get the money.
Tim, if I could say, I don't have it in front of me, but there is an actual document from the Federal Highway Administration, and it's dated, I believe, December 12th of 2021, that specifically states that that the preference is no new highways, that the money that's available should be spent for existing improvements of roads and bridges that are needed.
So is that it would be great to get that document out there or a link to it, and for us to be quoting it. I don't know if it's something we can use in any kind of court challenge, because if it's just guidance, I doubt, but it would be useful to use, don't you think?
And it's also the states a number of states have already been pushing back against that guidance, including Indiana. So
of course.
So whether the U.S. Department of Transportation is willing to stick to its guns and enforce that remains to be seen, but we should certainly be raising it.
Yeah, I'll find that document and share it.
Yeah, and I have the letter from the governors that push back on that too.
Share that. That'll be good.
Lisa also mentions, asks about whether the DEIS addresses environmental justice impacts, and that's a very good question. There is discussion of that in there, whether it's adequate or not. I don't think we've really fully evaluated that yet, but it is certainly a requirement that be addressed. Just scrolling through here to see if we've gotten to all the key questions. Jessica mentions she hears there's a new development pending at Patoka Lake, a hotel to go with the winery.
Here we go, Stephen Bartles.
Yes. Yeah, they're putting a brewery in there too.
Oh, that's okay.
So is that going to be on the south side of the lake near Newton Stewart, I assume then?
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, this wouldn't Route P doesn't really go over there, but I can see why people would who I could see why Bartles might think having a new superhighway nearby will bring more business to him, and whatever.
Well, just like the push for the bypasses around Jasper Huntingburg has been around a long time, so has the connection from French Lick to Mitchell across new terrain. Which was embodied in Route O. That's not a new proposal either. That's been out there for many, many years. And that then links south along 145 past Patoka Lake, south of French Lick. So we're at 17 after, and I think we've covered
Let's go watch the hearing.
about all the questions and comments that we can. So I think we'll wrap it up here. Let people get back to their evenings. And again, please get your comments in by next Tuesday, and take to heart some of the things we've been saying, and we'll share more information with you via email after the call, and continue to follow what's going on and share your comments with elected officials, particularly Governor Holcomb, who again, we can't underemphasize or overemphasize the importance of reaching the governor, because he will be the decision maker on this project. So that remains very important. Any last comments, Mark or Jeff or Emily?
I don't, I think I did on my list of contacts. I think I have a more direct email address for the governor that's included on there. It's govholcomb at in dot, it's govholcomb at gov.in.gov.
Yes.
It's on,
Yeah,
on our Facebook page.
and if you're so inclined, you can always pick up the phone and call 317-232-4567. And that's Governor Holcomb's receptionist will pick up and, you know, politely leave them a stern message about the need for the governor to cancel this awful project.
Outright.
And get your friends to do it. Tie up their line. 317-232-4567. Governor Holcomb.
First thing tomorrow, and then write the comments.
Well, if there are no other key questions or comments, thank you again for everybody for participating, and Mark and Jeff for being part of our panel and all of your great information. We greatly appreciate it. And rest assured that our organizations will continue to work on this and work towards the right outcome, which is no new terrain highway. So,
Tim, thanks for setting it up.
Yeah, thank you, Tim, for great job setting it up.
and thank you, Emily, for your
Emily.
assistance with this. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.